Welcome to the Christian Liberation Organization. Thank you for joining us for PC4, Part 2. PC4, Jannes Jambres, Part 2 of 4. In Part 2 of this Prophecy Considered series, we continue our study of the Scripture 2 Timothy 3, 1-9. As we complete the word study of each verse in Part 2, we uncover more of what was intended for us to understand for end-time prophecy. 2 Timothy 3:6. For of this sort are those who creep into households, and make captives of those gullible, loaded down with sins, led away by various lusts. Note 1. The word translated as of is the Greek preposition ek, which means out from and to. Note 2. The word translated as are is the Greek verb eimi, which means am, or is, or exists. Note 3. The word translated as those is the Greek definite article the. Note 4. There is no who in the Greek. Note 5. The definite article the before households was removed by the translators. Note 6. The word translated as lusts is the Greek noun epithumia, which here means focused on evil, passionate desires. The first century version, for out from this sort exists the creeping into households and make captives of those gullible, loaded down with not being a part of God's inworked persuasion, led away by various focuses on evil, passionate desires. 2 Timothy 3:7. Always learning and never able to come to the knowledge of the truth. Note 1. The word translated as learning is the Greek verb menthano, which means learning key facts. Note 2. The word translated as to is the Greek preposition eis, which means into. Note 3. There is no definite article the before knowledge. Note 4. There is no to before come. Note 5. The word translated as knowledge is the Greek noun epignosis, which is a compound word meaning experiential knowledge gained through first-hand relationship. Note 6. The word translated as able is the Greek verb dunamai, which means to show the power to achieve by applying the Lord's inherent abilities. The first century version, 2 Timothy 3:7, always learning key facts and never showing the power to achieve by applying the Lord's inherent abilities, coming into experiential knowledge gained through first-hand relationship of the reality. Second Timothy 3:8. Now as Jannes and Jambres resisted Moses, so do these also resist the truth. Men of corrupt minds, disapproved concerning the faith. Note 1. The word translated as resisted is the Greek verb anthistemi, which means stand against. Note 2. The word translated as men is the Greek noun anthropos, which means men and women, or mankind. The first century version, now as Jannes and Jambres stood against Moses, so do these also stand against the reality. Men and women of corrupt minds, disapproved concerning the divine persuasion of God. 2 Timothy 3:9. But they will progress no further, for their folly will be manifest to all, as theirs also was. Note 1. The translators remove the Greek adjective pleon before further. This verse is not saying that they will not progress any further, but that they will not progress much further. Note 2. The word translated as further is the Greek preposition epi, which means upon. Note 3. The word translated as folly is the Greek noun anoi, which has a full and rich meaning of lack of mental sense, which has degenerated into a state of extreme anger, fury, and great rage, resulting in the incapacity to use one's reflective thinking. The first century version. But they will not progress much upon, for their lack of mental sense, which has degenerated into a state of extreme anger, fury, and great rage, resulting in the incapacity to use one's reflective thinking, will be manifest to all, as theirs also was. Now read the entirety of this scripture in the first century version. Moreover, intimately experience this, that inside the last days, times fiercely difficult to stand inside, even to the point of being injurious. For the men and women will be lovers of themselves, lovers of money, boasters, proud, reversers of spiritual and moral realities, unwilling to be persuaded by parents, unthankful, unholy, unloving, unable to please, slanderers, without self-control, brutal, despisers of good, traitors, headstrong, morally blind, resulting from poor judgment, which brings further loss of spiritual perception, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God, having a personally esteemed well-formed, indeed, denying its ability to achieve by applying the Lord's inherent abilities. And from these turn away, for out from this sort exists the creeping into households and make captive of those gullible, loaded down with not being part of God's inward persuasion, led away by various focuses on evil, passionate desires, always learning key facts and never showing the power to achieve by applying the Lord's inherent abilities, coming into experiential knowledge gained through his first-hand relationship of the reality. Now as Jannes and Jambres stood against Moses, so do these also stand against the reality. Men and women of corrupt minds disapprove concerning the divine persuasion of God, but they will not progress much upon, for their lack of mental sense, which is degenerated into a state of extreme anger, fury, and great rage, resulting in the incapacity to use one's reflective thinking, will be manifest to all, as theirs also was. Note 1. This scripture is instructing to intimately experience what is about to be said. This is a very strong message to pay attention and make this a part of our life. Note 2. This warning of end times goes on to state a reason why this is to be intimately understood, because not being aware of them will be injurious. It will harm us. Are the events in the world today showing themselves to be doing just that? Note 3. This goes on to explain that those that are not a part of being persuaded by God working in them will not apply the Lord's inherent abilities. This is deep and far-reaching into life. One application is that Jesus is the great physician. He healed physical blindness, the deaf and mute, the lame, leprosy, the demon-possessed, and even healed death. Jesus is empowered with all of Abba Father's ability and wisdom. Solomon gave us many ways to health when he told us in Proverbs that a joyful heart is good medicine, but a broken spirit dries up the bones. Pleasant words are a honeycomb that is sweet to the soul and healing to the bones. Anxiety in our heart weighs it down, but a good word makes it glad. A soothing tongue is a tree of life, but perversion crushes the spirit. And a tranquil heart is life to the body, but erotic passion rots the bones. Modern medicine has begun to catch up to the eternal wisdom of God in that it has begun to realize the healing capacity of our minds, even stating that 50 to 80% of illness is derived from our minds, or what we believe. In the last 2 years, has not most of mankind placed its faith in man's wisdom over God's, in the form of completely trusting man's cause and cure of a virus? In doing so, worshiping these men and their forms of life preservation as our ultimate salvation from death. This is a great idolatry. The golden calf of Moses' time never reached such evil depths. Note 4. This is giving us an example of what to expect in the end times. Jannes and Jambres were the Pharaoh's magicians that stood against Moses. So will these that are without God's inward persuasion in the end times work against God's created beings. They will stand against God and those that are his. Note 5. These magicians of Moses in time were exposed as frauds by Aaron's staff that had also turned to a snake, but devoured the magician's snakes. However, those that witnessed it and Pharaoh continued to believe in them. Once the magicians themselves admitted they were frauds, after not being able to continue to imitate God's plagues, the people and Pharaoh no longer followed them. So too will it be obvious when they are exposed of fraud in the end times. Next week, in PC4 Part 3, when we consider the Exodus account of these men, we learn a great deal about them, and so about the times we are currently experiencing. CLO encourages everyone to take this understanding of these words and apply them to every scripture that includes them.